In today's video, I want to talk about the 2020 Senate map. Now, what we hear most people talking about is, can the Republicans keep their majority? Is there a possibility that the Democrats might be able to get to the 50 or 51 Senate seats that they would need to take control of the Senate? Well, I'm going to go beyond that. In this video, I want to talk about what is the best possible case scenario that the Democrats could have in the Senate in the 2020 election. So I've already filled out a number of the seats, and that gets us right now at a 41-41 split between the Democrats and Republicans. The rest of these states I want to do a little bit of a discussion about, and whether I think the Democrats have an okay shot at picking it up, a decent shot at picking it up, something within the realm of possibility where they can go on and win some of these Senate seats that right now are leaning over to the Republicans in some instances. So jumping right into it, I'm going to work my way from west back to east. So starting down in the state of Arizona, Martha McSally was appointed to this Senate seat, and McSally actually lost in the 2018 Senate election to Kyrsten Sinema, the Democrat, running in that one. And it looks like she's probably going to be running against astronaut Mark Kelly, and I actually think Kelly could be an even tougher matchup for McSally than what she faced in 2018, and I think the Democrats have a pretty decent shot at going on and taking that one out in the state of Arizona. New Mexico, it's going to be an open situation, so the Democrats aren't going to have the incumbency advantage, but given the demographics of the state, how it's been trending, and just in terms of the southwest region of the United States, how a lot of these states have been trending towards the Democrats, no more so has that been the case for then a state like New Mexico, and one would expect certainly that the Democrats would continue to carry that particular race. Colorado, a great opportunity for the Democrats because the Republican Cory Gardner, very underwater in terms of his low approval numbers, and this is a state that has been trending in a very positive direction for the Democrats over the past decade or so, and looking like a great opportunity that the Democrats might be able to pick this one up from an incumbent Republican. Then we go up to the state of Montana. Now, the Republicans have a pretty decent shot at going on and keeping this one with incumbent Republican Steve Daines, but if the Democrats are going to go on and be competitive and maybe pick this one up, it would be because Democratic governor, popular governor there in the state, Steve Bullock, decided not to run for the presidency anymore. Whatever vanity project he's going on running for the presidency, not even able to get to the point where he's making it up onto the debate stage. He'd much better serve his party if he ran in the Senate seat here in the state of Montana. So if we do get a situation where it is Bullock versus Daines, that actually gives the Democrats a shot at grabbing this one. So in that hypothetical scenario, best case here, the Democrats could go on and pick up another Senate seat in Montana. Of course, the Democrats already have the other Senate seat from the state, with Jon Tester winning his reelection in 2018. Then going down to the state of Kansas, a best case scenario here for the Democrats is if Chris Kobach won on the Republican side, because we saw back in 2018, the relatively unpopular Kobach was the Republican challenger in the governor's race statewide, and the Democrats went on and won that one by a decent margin in the state. So if we get a situation where it is Kobach versus whoever the Democrats end up winning in their primary, it would give them a decent shot at going on and taking this Senate seat. Now, there's a lot of rumors going around that Mike Pompeo might want to go ahead and run for this Republican primary and try to pick up this Senate seat. Maybe he would be a tougher opponent than Kobach, but again, this video just doing a best case scenario for the Democrats, so it would be a Kobach situation on the Republican side, and if that is the case, then the Democrats would have a shot at possibly winning this particular Senate seat. All right, now moving down to Texas, the demographics continuing to get better for the Democratic Party in the state, and in 2018, Beto O'Rourke proved that Democrats can be highly competitive statewide. We're a couple of years removed from that, where one would assume that the demographics have shifted even more so in the favor of the Democratic Party. Now, it still might be a few election cycles away before this becomes a true purple state, but maybe sometime over the next decade, that is probably where the state of Texas is trending. Now, the Republicans have the incumbency advantage with John Cornyn. Cornyn isn't as well known in the state of Texas as Ted Cruz. I don't think he would have quite as much of an incumbency advantage as what we had Cruz show in 2018, but that was still a highly competitive race against O'Rourke, where it was within about 2 or so percentage points. If Beto O'Rourke wanted to run for this Senate race, I think he might be the Democrats' best case scenario to take down Cornyn, but then again, those on the other side will say, well, his stance on guns is going to be an untenable situation for him in a state like Texas. And then the other Democrats that are running in this primary, not quite as well known as Beto O'Rourke, but to be fair, that's also the case with O'Rourke, where not a lot of people knew who he was before he went on and won the Democratic primary, and then going into that head-to-head against Senator Cruz, where he was able to gain a lot of popularity. But still, at the end of the day, the presidential race probably going to be very close in the state of Texas, whether it's Sanders or Biden. Probably the best case for the Democrats to be competitive in the state of Texas, at least based on what the polls are saying at this point in time. And also just the scenario that we had in 2018, where the Democrats turned out a lot more than what you typically see from the party in the state, because it's just been such a long time since the Democrats have been able to have statewide success in Texas. That kind of depresses the vote if you think that you don't have any chance. Well, 2018 kind of changed the narrative, where now the Democrats really feel like they can go on and win statewide in Texas. And beyond that, on the federal level, there's a number of congressional districts that the Democrats are also going to be making a play for and trying to flip for 2020. And in a best case scenario against a not all that well-known incumbent in John Cornyn, I think that it is possible, depending on who the Democrats go on and nominate. Again, like I said, maybe O'Rourke is their best case, but there's going to be a lot of Democrats running there, and we don't even know necessarily if O'Rourke will decide to throw his hat in the ring or not, but I still think that it's going to be highly competitive, and in a best-case scenario, the Democrats can possibly pick that one up. Going over to the state of Mississippi, this was a special election where people felt like the Democrats could maybe keep things relatively competitive that we just had over these past couple of years. And now incumbent Sidney Hyde-Smith, who went on and won that special election, is running for re-election. The fact that she is now the incumbent and has more name recognition, and the fact that Mississippi is a very Republican-leaning state, going to be giving this one to the Republicans. Even in a best-case scenario, I don't think the Democrats are going to be able to have enough to push them over the line in a state like Mississippi. Going over one state to Alabama, the Democrats actually have the incumbency advantage with Doug Jones. He won the special election, and maybe somewhat surprising to many of you out there, Doug Jones is actually to the positive with his overall approval in the state of Alabama, so that means he at least has a puncher's chance to go on and continue to claim this Senate seat in what is one of the deepest red states that we have. Now, I'm skeptical that Jones is going to go on and win this one. I was actually skeptical that he was even going to be able to win the special election, and that was going against Roy Moore. Maybe if he goes against Roy Moore again in this one, that would give him a possibility to go on and win this. That's probably his best case scenario, but it also looks like he might be running against Jeff Sessions, who was the previous Republican senator from the state, so that would make things really tough possibly for Doug Jones to win his re-election bid. Now let's go up into the Midwest. So we have the state of Iowa, which has 2 Republican senators right now, and that could very well change because the incumbent here, Joni Ernst, not the greatest numbers in terms of her approval. It's actually been reducing over the past year or so. And then on top of that, we have a state like Iowa that has shown the ability to go one way or the other in terms of the swing between the parties quite significantly over the past decade or so. So going into 2008, there was a big push for the Democrats with Barack Obama. He was able to galvanize the state around him, and he did extremely well in his 2008 election in Iowa. In 2012, he was also able to carry the state, but then in 2016, there was that huge Republican primary field. The Republicans spent a ton of time in the state, and then Trump, of course, going on and winning the nomination. All of that time the Republicans spent in the state, I think, was a positive for them having more success in recent years. I think that could possibly change going towards 2020. Now, in 2018, there's 4 congressional districts in Iowa. 3 of them went to the Democrats, and the 4th one, which is the most conservative, was actually extremely close and is likely to be a pretty close race in that 4th congressional district again going into 2020. So if there's a situation where the Democrats could feasibly win all 4 congressional districts in Iowa, then that means statewide there's certainly a possibility that not just for the presidency in 2020, but also this Senate seat are very much in the up for grabs scenario. It's going to depend maybe on who the Democrats decide to nominate. So maybe somebody that has a bit of name recognition. We'll see who they end up, or who ends up winning that Democratic primary. But still, at the end of the day, given the fact that Joni Ernst isn't the most approved of senator by any means, and just how much time the Democratic Party right now is spending in the state of Iowa, that gives them a chance to have a bit of success going towards 2020 and picking that one up. Then we go up to the state of Minnesota, one of the more left-leaning Midwestern states, certainly been trending that way, and the Democrats had a ton of success in the state of Minnesota in 2018, winning the special election with Tina Smith and then also just the regular Senate election with Amy Klobuchar. Now Tina Smith is the incumbent Democrat going to be running again here in 2020, and it seems like she would have a really good shot at going on and continuing to win in the state. Moving over to Michigan, the Democrats have the incumbency advantage with Gary Peters. He is one of the lesser-known senators in his home state, which makes his incumbency advantage not quite as strong. Now, Gary Peters, his last election that we saw from him was back in 2014, and that wasn't a great year for the Democrats nationally, but he still had quite a bit of success as he went on and won this Senate election. On the Republican side, it might be John James, who was running against Debbie Stabenow back in 2018, and maybe he was a little bit more competitive than what people were expecting. He still lost, I believe, by around 7 or so percentage points, and it might be relatively close, but I think that Gary Peters, still with his incumbency advantage and the fact that statewide the Democrats did really well in 2018, that probably carries over to 2020. I think the Democrats should feel pretty solid in their position as they try to go on and continue to hold the state of Michigan. Now going down to Kentucky, where you have Mitch McConnell, the incumbent Republican. He is the most disapproved of senator out of all 100 senators, which isn't what you want to be in your home state. On top of that, I felt like with Mitch McConnell, there was still, even though that he's very disapproved of in the state of Kentucky, that he would still be able to claim this one because Kentucky is quite a consistently Republican-leaning state statewide. But in just recently, we saw statewide the Democrats win the governorship with Beshear, and that was because they were able to turn out very large voter numbers in the population centers in and around Louisville, as well as Lexington. And if that's the case here in 2020, it's at least within the realm of possibility that the Democrats might be able to seriously contend for this one. Now, if it's Amy McGrath, I'm skeptical that she would be able to have success statewide in Kentucky. She feels like she might be one of the front runners to go on and win that one. But if it's somebody like sports talk show guy Matt Jones, I think that he might be able to do a bit better in terms of a statewide appeal. In Kentucky, if it's a Matt Jones versus Mitch McConnell, I think that might be the Democrats' best case scenario. And I think that it could be really close, just like we saw in the governor's race. But at the end of the day, the Republicans had a really unpopular incumbent governor that lost to a Democrat, and now they're having a really unpopular incumbent Republican running in this Senate seat. I think that it's at least within the realm of reasonability that the Democrats could be highly competitive and maybe go on and win this one in a close race, just like we saw in that governor's race recently. Now let's move back down here into the southeast with the state of Georgia. So Georgia's going to have 2 Senate elections, kind of like what we saw in Minnesota in the 2018 midterms. So just their regular Senate seat and then the special election because of Isaacson stepping down. The incumbent here is going to be Republican David Puerdue. He actually has really strong approval numbers, so that gives him a really good shot at picking this one up. If it is Stacey Abrams that runs against David Puerdue, I think that that's the best case scenario for the Democrats, and I think that that could be enough for them to pick up that Senate seat. That's going to be the tougher one for the Democrats to win because, of course, you're taking on the incumbent in that situation. But I've heard some positive news out of the state of Georgia for the Democrats, specifically the number of new registered voters from the African-American community. I've heard it's something like 400 to 500,000 new registered voters from the African-American community after Stacey Abrams lost that really close competitive election back in 2018. And another reason why the Democrats are becoming more competitive statewide in Georgia, it's not just because they're doing better and turning out more vote in the population center of Atlanta, but it's also the suburbs in and around Atlanta that are trending towards the Democrats. They're having more success in those congressional districts. They've been able to flip some of those results, and where the population center is in Georgia is by and large in that Atlanta and then suburban Atlanta area, which is looking much more favorable for the Democrats, which are giving them a shot to win these statewide races. And then the special election, that's going to be an open seat, so it's going to be no incumbency advantage for either party. Maybe it's Jon Ossoff for the Democrats. I don't know if he'd be able to galvanize a statewide successful campaign, but if the Democrats are in a situation where they can feasibly take down David Puerdue, then one would think that that would also carry down ballot success to this special election. So this is probably going out on a little bit more of a limb than maybe some of these other results even, but I think that the Democrats at least have somewhat of a realm of possibility that they could go on and win these 2 Senate seats. Again, this is a best case scenario for the Democrats. Moving up to the state of North Carolina, Republicans have the incumbency with Thom Tillis, but there's a couple of big negatives to that. In terms of senators in their home state, Thom Tillis is one of the least known senators, so that means his incumbency advantage doesn't mean all that much. On top of that, he's below water with his approval numbers. And then on the Democrat side, I don't think they've done necessarily a great job in terms of recruiting really strong Democratic candidates, those that would be well-known and have a chance to win statewide up to this point. We'll see if that changes. But nonetheless, in a best-case scenario, in what's a purple state, likely to be a competitive race, you definitely give the Democrats a chance to go on and win that one. Moving up to Virginia, a state that's been trending towards the Democrats over the past decade or so, and then they have the incumbency advantage with Mark Warner. Feels like this one is going to be a relatively safe keep for the Democratic Party. Also moving up to New Hampshire, Jeanne Shaheen. She has really high approval numbers. She is in the top 10 in terms of most approved of senator from their home state, which gives her a really great shot at going on and continuing to win this one. Also, she has that incumbency advantage. And then the last result we have is up in the state of Maine. The Republicans have the incumbent with Susan Collins, but her numbers have absolutely cratered over the past year. Really, ever since the Brett Kavanaugh situation, Susan Collins has sunken like a rock with her approval. The only other senator out of all 100 senators that has a higher disapproval from their home state is Mitch McConnell in Kentucky. But the most recent numbers that I've seen with that, she's only 1 percentage point less disapproved of in her home state than what we see from McConnell in Kentucky. That is a really tough scenario for Collins. She might even have a tough time winning the Republican primary given how people have soured on her. But beyond that, the fact that Maine in general in a statewide race tends to go to the Democrats anyways, this is a really good opportunity for the Democratic Party to possibly pick up a Senate seat against an incumbent Republican. So those were all of the races that I wanted to touch on here. Obviously, this isn't likely to happen. This would just be in a sweep Democratic scenario in 2020 where they had all of their best case scenarios in terms of the Republicans they were running against and the Democrats that they would nominate in those primaries to win those to go ahead and have success in the general election. This is probably the best case scenario map that the Democrats could hope for. Not very likely to happen, but again, I thought it'd be a fun exercise to kind of go through and talk about what might be that best case scenario. So I appreciate you guys stopping on in for today's video, and if you want more of this type of content in the future, you can click that subscribe button. I hope to see you guys back here for my next video.